Hey! You didn't believe I actually recorded a second one of these Meet My Characters, did you? I swear, I really am back. This one just took me so long. It was about 6 hours-ish of footage, but coming up with the script and refining her backstory is actually what ate all of my time. I've been tweaking this for weeks. But today we're introducing Juniper, and she's probably my absolute favorite of all of my characters. You know I had to make it perfect. To fill time, I'm also going to briefly introduce not just my trainer, but a few of the Pokemon I drew her with. That said, I don't think I'm ever going to try to narrate over a 20-minute video ever again. In fact, let's just get into it before I drag this out even longer. So, Juniper was my first Pokemon trainer Sona. Instead of going out on an adventure at 10 years old like every Pokemon protagonist ever, her parents sent her to a prestigious boarding school. It's a lot like the Pokemon Technical Institute from the Indigo League anime, where graduates automatically qualify for gym leagues, and it's made up almost entirely of rich kids. But this school in Endeavor has less focus on Pokemon training and more on culture, history, and generally pruning kids to come into high society. That was not up Juniper's alley. She was a very hands-on kid, bored to death by history, and hated the stuffy classrooms and uniforms. The first semester was the worst, because a lot, if not most, of first-year students enrolled at the school didn't start with Pokemon partners, Juniper included. After the basics were covered the first semester, the school made a big tradition of a Pokemon Adoption Day. They impressed parents by providing purebred or rare or status symbol Pokemon for their students without partners to adopt. Families who had attended the school before and were now sending their own children often deliberately waited to partner their kids with Pokemon until that day, so it would be part of the big ceremony. Both of Juniper's parents had gone to that school and wanted the same for her. Now, Juniper wanted a Pokemon more than anything, except going home. She hated that school. From the second her parents arrived for adoption day, she was begging them to take her home. She'd been writing letters to them before this, but her complaints then and now were dismissed. They were so sure that this school would set her up for success as a trainer that they wouldn't hear otherwise. Juniper was completely distraught. She had zero interest in picking any of these uppity Pokemon, and the fact that her parents were trying so hard to make her like the school and bond with one of their Pokemon was too much. As soon as they turned their backs, she snuck off in a huff to the schoolyard. She didn't have a partner, and she hadn't made friends with any of her classmates, but during free time, she would wander the edge of the schoolyard, which led directly into a forest. That forest was chock full of wild Pokemon students would train against. Juniper had been very lucky so far, wandering around without a partner and not having any hostile encounters. But one Pokemon had taken notice of her, a Croagunk. This particular Croagunk was a pretty carefree Pokemon. He actually loved the school kids and went out of his way to battle with them, but he always let them win. Seeing how happy they were to beat him made him happy. Though, on the flip side, losing every single battle he had gave him a reputation among the school as a weak Pokemon, one that none of the students wanted to catch. Now he didn't mind, he liked his life in the wild. But when he saw Juniper, a young girl with no partner wandering around, he took it upon himself to keep an eye on her. Her walks until now had been uneventful, largely because Wobble preemptively shooed off any hostile wild Pokemon. But today, as Juniper storms off in a huff, making all sorts of noise and potentially trampling Pokemon dens, there's only so much one frog could do. Predictably, she stepped on a sleeping Servine's tail. Groggy and throbbing from a smashed tail, the Servine blindly just lashed out at everything around it, smacking and startling a screeching Juniper, which finally alerted her worried parents to her location. Yet just knowing her location wasn't enough, they couldn't get there in time. But Croagunk would. He lunged from the bushes, cheeks already welling up with a venomous spray. All Juniper saw was a blur, but a pretty awesome blur at that. Thanks greatly to his poison-type advantage, the Krogunk quickly cinched the battle. Now, Juniper was genuinely grateful to her rescuer, but as the commotion attracted the attention of her parents and their search party, Juniper saw the opportunity for malicious compliance. As her parents rushed to check on her, Juniper insisted that Wobbles was the only Pokemon she would partner with. She thought the staff would step in and mention the Krogunk's reputation as a weak student opponent, or at the very least wouldn't approve of a rough and rowdy wild Pokemon. But to her surprise, they approved wholeheartedly. They were just thrilled to see Juniper's change of tune and grateful for his rescue. Before she knew what was happening, a student aide handed her a Pokeball to catch him with. Juniper didn't know this Krogunk that well. Well, he just saved her, and she didn't even know if he wanted to be caught. She was just looking for a way out and dug herself deeper down. She froze under the weight of her own consequences. Fortunately for her, he didn't mind. He'd been looking out for her anyway, and it was clear she needed a friend. Though she hesitated, he helped himself to the Pokeball. Never had she imagined that her first partner would be a Krogunk of all Pokemon, so the pressure to come up with a fitting name was on. Not that she was even good at names in the first place. In the heat of the moment, all she could come up with was Wobbles, for the goofy way he flopped and sauntered around. Wobbles. So started their lifelong partnership. Wobbles definitely made life at boarding school bearable, but Juniper never stopped trying to convince her parents to bring her home. She never got along with any of those snooty rich kids, and though her choice of Pokemon didn't seem to bother her parents, it sure ruffled feathers within the school. She soon had rivalries with lots of fairy and normal type users, determined to overcome their poison fighting weakness, and psychic users that just wanted to beat a dead horse. When begging her parents to come home didn't work, she started deliberately flunking classes in hopes they'd pull her out, instead earning more tutors and study time. She rebelled, refusing to adhere to dress code. She cut her own hair, but no reaction from her parents besides urging her to try harder. After years at this boarding school and being utterly ignored, she finally resigned herself to return the favor. Graduation finally came around the day she'd been waiting for, but Juniper refused to go back home. Instead, she and Wobbles moved to a sleepy town in the sleepy region of Endeavor. There, she met and teamed up with the up-and-coming fire-type trainer Ronan and his Growlithe, and the soft-spoken grass-type specialist Dahlia and her Eevee. Now, they started off a little rough, but all three of them, being all new trainers in this town, inevitably brought them into adventuring together. Their trainer licenses were hot off the presses, and they were all eager to start catching Pokemon. Ronan instantly set fire to, and then caught, a Bidoof named Skip. Dahlia caught the Pharisee Needle pretty early too, but Juniper? Nothing. She had a great arm and even better aim, but Pokeball after Pokeball broke on impact for nearly 3 days of catching straight. Ronan and Dahlia were coming up on their second and third catches, and all three of them ended up out camping. Juniper was kind of sulking off on her own next to the creek, staring off into the water feeling sorry for herself. The water in that creek wasn't deep, but it was murky. Murky enough that Juniper didn't notice the bright shimmer of orange scales until a Magikarp had breached itself on an extra shallow patch. A more empathetic trainer might have helped it back into the water. Juniper, on the other hand, readied a Pokeball and decided that the Magikarp could either become her partner or it could become dinner. Thankfully, it opted to partner up, and now boasting her first, if not cheap, catch, Juniper named him Gorble. Yeah, still not great at names. After going on a couple particularly rough adventures together, the team decided their wardrobes had seen better days. Small a town as it was home to a local, up-and-coming fashion designer. She had a small boutique of mostly cheap retail items, but a few really nice hand-tailored showpieces advertised in the windows. The seamstress had been working on an evolution outfit collection, and as Dahlia's Eevee had since turned into a Leafeon, they caught her eye. She approached them with a proposition. If they could catch one of every other evolution to help model her designs, she would set them up with some custom-tailored pieces. Ever-competitive Juniper and Ronan, of course, turned it into a competition to see who could catch them all first. Dahlia was unwittingly dragged into their contest, and all three of them soon found themselves in the woods hunting Eevee. Since Dahlia's own partner had been an Eevee, she understood them well and knew of several places to search. Ronan had attended the Pokemon Ranger Academy, and he was great at tracking down his own. Tracking, though, wasn't taught at Juniper's boarding school, nor did she know much about their native environment as Dahlia. She had to rely entirely on luck just to happen across one, and even more luck to actually catch it. And considering her catching luck, those odds weren't great. Sure enough, by the end of the day, Juniper returned empty-handed. Meanwhile, Dahlia and Ronan were already waiting for her, literally rolling around in a mound of wiggling, playful Eevees. So many that, blinded by her own genius, Juniper thought she could get away with sneaking one or two of them from their swarm without being noticed. Even one she thought would curb her embarrassment. She started making small talk to throw them off, and picked one Eevee from the bunch, as if she was just admiring and petting it. When they inevitably asked her how many she caught, she claimed the one she was holding was hers. Of course, they weren't stupid, they called her out instantly. But she dug her heels in and played dumb, insisting it was hers. Unfortunately, Ronan came up with the rather obvious solution to simply recall all the Eevee into their Pokeballs, which then withdrew the quote-unquote borrowed Eevee straight from Juniper's arms. The jig was up. Not that Juniper really thought it would work, but her cheeks still flushed red. She tried to look anywhere but their faces. And that anywhere happened to settle on one Pokemon that had been missed. An especially small Eevee with a distinct white spot on her nose was left standing between Dahlia and Ronan. Before anyone could react, Juniper whipped out a Pokeball and clocked her on the head. The Eevee, probably stunned, rightfully so, put up no fight and let Juniper catch her. Ronan and Dahlia double and triple checked their own Pokeballs, but neither remembered catching an Eevee with that distinct white marking. It must have just been curious what they were doing with so many other Eevee and enjoying the pack when they weren't looking. So by sheer luck, Juniper proudly walked away with her very own, mostly legitimately caught Eevee after all. Because of her small size, Juniper named her Twee. Now Twee becomes a very important Pokemon for Juniper later. You've probably noticed by now, Juniper doesn't seem particularly close to her Pokemon. He looks out for her, but she partnered with Wobbles by accident, while trying just to spite her parents. Gorble was caught out of frustration, under threat of being eaten. I'm not going to go through every one of her Pokemon, but she has caught a few more since Gorble. None of whom chose willingly to be her partner, they were all caught. Most of them were just simply indifferent. Twee is the Pokemon that changed that. Now, Juniper had her heart set on evolving Twee into a Vaporeon. The seamstress had provided them with all the evolution stones they needed to finish out their evolution collection, so she offered the water stone to Twee. Twee adamantly refused. At first she made Juniper chase her like it was a game, but when she got tired of that, Twee started nipping, whining, raising her fur. And hard-headed as ever, Juniper took that as a challenge. She wasn't one to be beaten, and wasn't getting the message either. Juniper was the trainer, and Juniper wanted a Vaporeon. Dahlia, the resident Eevee expert, eventually had to step in and cool Juniper off. It took a lot of time and bonding with Twee to smooth that over. but time was one thing they did have. Of all her Pokemon, Twee definitely brandished the most personality. After a while, Juniper had to admit, even Twee's own hard-headedness was a little charming. So finally the day came where Juniper sat Twee down and offered her the choice of every evolution stone. It wasn't cheap to round up all those stones, mind you. But you just couldn't put a price on Twee. Thrilled Juniper had come around, Twee just wanted to leap to her trainer for cuddles, and evolved in the process. A Sylveon. Juniper cried and cried for the first time since boarding school. Not from disappointment, but because of all her options, it was Twee's love, genuine love for her trainer that made her evolve. It changed the way she looked at all Pokemon forever. Fast forward a few months later, the three of them have been living in and out of a local inn as they could afford it and camping when they couldn't. After a bit of research, Dahlia finds some undeveloped land on the outskirts of town being sold for dirt cheap, as far as property goes, that is. Still, no one of them could afford it, but if they all pooled their money, they could just make a down payment. Dahlia swore that with her grass-type expertise, she could start a profitable garden. Ronan himself actually grew up on a farm. After looking over her business plan, he agreed it was solid and he wanted in. Juniper didn't know a thing about farming, on the other hand, but she was sick of living off of odd jobs and camping every night, so it wasn't hard to convince her. A deed was signed with all three of their names, and they trekked off to make a new, more permanent camp on their little plot of land. Now, they'd seen this property before buying, of course, but when they returned this time, they found a young Mudbray curled up in the dirt. It was an odd color. He had a golden stripe along his head, shoulders, and back, as if just the top half of him was shiny. He was very thin and clearly hadn't eaten in a while. Ronan and Juniper carefully approached to cut off his escape while Dahlia found him some food. It didn't take long for Juniper to get attached. Dahlia's green thumb and farming background set them up well for this new venture, but Juniper felt she had nothing to contribute. But in this Mudbray, she saw potential for a strong workhorse. If she couldn't contribute much in way of experience, she would train up their Pokemon to pick up the slack. As much as she hated the experience, she did go to a trainer's school after all. This Mudbray marked the start of her taking that education seriously, and really buckling down to work with all of their partners. Through training it, the Mudbray really bonded with Juniper, allowed her to catch it, and evolved into ButterBrew, the Mudsdale. I can't believe I'm finally about to say this, but we're running out of time, so I'll leave our last two friends for another time. If you want to hear about her hair-crossed Chitters, or her very peculiar Mew, Squig, let me know in the comments. I could give them their whole episode. Well, that'll be a very blue piece. I am so glad to have finally gotten that finished. I was determined to post this before Artfight. Speaking of, for anyone who hasn't heard, Artfight 2022 starts July 1st, just 4 days from when I'm posting this. You know the channel will start popping off again as soon as Artfight goes live. I really hope you'll join me. If you've made it this far, sincerely, thank you so much for watching. This took so much extra effort. I really hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and happy arting!